Now we're going to look at the stepper motor, okay? Now I've done a couple of videos on this. This is probably going to be a bit of a longer video, so sit back and relax. But it is important. There's a lot going on in it. There's a couple of new concepts that's happening, and it's a motor that we're going to use in a couple of other videos. So it's good to get a good grasp of it early on. All right. Now it's not that it's too complicated to use. The stepper motor actually simplifies a lot of motor control theory for us, and it gives us a very accurate and a great way of controlling systems. But there is a little bit involved, and as I go through the code, and there's a little bit of the hardware I want to go through as well, just for our own setup in some of the equipment that we're using. There's a little bit of differences and stuff, so I just want to cover that. So we'll be doing a little bit of code, looking at the wiring diagram, and then looking at the circuit setup. Like I said, I've done some other videos on it. It gets a little bit messy at times, so hopefully some of these videos will tidy a few things up and make it a bit clearer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into the video that we have just looking at. Here is our stepper motor, okay? And we have a stepper motor driver board, okay? So there's a chip there that helps us control the stepper motor. So it does simplify it a bit for us, right? Now I'm just showing you the setup we have here and how we would set it up with the equipment that we have. Okay, so we're just going to look at that for the moment. Like I said, this is what you should get out of the box. You've got the driver motor chip. So you've got a wee socket there at the right hand side that's going to connect into those cables on the left, which we have from our motor. And then we're going to take the I suppose the output of that driver board into our MBED. Okay. Now this is one I've done earlier. I've just got some nice jumper leads here. You probably don't have them at home. But what it just does is it kind of groups it together. They're tied together nicely, and it will take them onto my setup a little bit easier. Okay. Now you might not have that, so I'm going to show you a way around it. Okay, but just showing you that's the way it's set up. That's what I have. See, there's nice jumper cables there that will allow it to connect to the breadboard a little bit easier than what we probably have for most people. But just to show you, don't fear, what you do is just connect the board in upside down, okay? And it pushes nice and easy into the breadboard, okay? Now the only thing is, just maybe take a picture of the chip, the front side of the chip, so that you know which pin is which, okay, because you're looking at it upside down. But you can nice and neatly then connect your wires across. Just remember, you're looking at it upside down, so you can join in beside those pins and connect them to whatever way we need to connect up our board. Okay, so that's more than likely what you'll have at home. If you have some of them jumper wires, you can go ahead, or you can solder them, or whatever you need to do. But for most people, that's maybe what you're going to need to do. Put the driver board in upside down. Okay, and I suppose I'll just go back. Make sure you leave a bit of room here overlapping, because that's where the white connector joins in. And this part here, which goes to your motor itself. Okay, so just a little bit of the quirks that's needed to get this set up. Now, just as we continue on with that, the other thing with the stepper motor is just when you're viewing it, okay, all you're going to see rotating is this little axle here, and it's quite hard to see it rotating at times. So what I've done is I've just tied a little bit of wire, wrap it around it, so you'll see the wire turning, and it just makes it a bit more visible to see. So I do recommend doing that as well. And that'll get your board set up. That'll allow you to use the stepper motor, okay? So just a little bit of the quirks with it, but nothing too crazy. The other thing you may or may not have is just a little push button, okay? The one I'm using here, just to show you how they're used, is slightly different to one that I'm going to show you in the wiring diagram, but it's useful to see some of this. Now we've had buttons before, but they were switch buttons. Okay, they were detent. They stayed in position. whereas this one's here it's a little push button, spring return push button. Alright, so what this one will do is, as I push it, it just gives a brief signal into the MBED. So it's not like a switch where it's constantly on. Now just when you're wiring these up, it's very simple. You have your power, and then you take your signal into the MBED. You just need to crisscross the connections, okay? So that's why if you connect it in this side, the out of it is here. If you went on the other side, you would have to use this side. So they are the two, and that's the switch contact across there. If you were using it the other way, you'd have to go that way. That's where the switch is, okay, or the button contact, push to make, okay? So just stressing that, again, if you're wiring these up, it's got 4 legs, so you've got to know which one to use. You have to use them in diagonal pairs, because them 2 wires are already joined together. Same with those 2 are joined together. So that's why you have to go either one diagonal or along the other diagonal. Now, like I said, you might not have that at home, so I'm going to show you another trick around it. But finally, we're getting into seeing this is our system setup. Okay, so you can see I've just got my jumper cables connected nicely into my breadboard. Your driver board might be upside down. That's fine. We can see we've got this wire wrapped around the motor just so I can see it turning around. And what we've got here is we've got our two LEDs. One's just going to show the motor turning clockwise, the other one's going to show it turning anti-clockwise. So it's just that we've got some visual indication there. Okay. Now if I go ahead and play this, we'll see our setup. Like I'm saying, we've just got 2 LEDs connected in, fairly straightforward, well used to that at this stage. All we need to control our stepper motor is just 4 outputs, 4 digital outputs that we need to give in to the driver board, and that will allow us to control the motor. Okay. Now we're going to be doing other videos on this, so we'll explain a little bit more about how the stepper motor works, and we'll learn that a little bit more later. But all we need is 4 digital outputs to control this device, which is quite nice. Now we need a power supply, and it needs to be a 5-volt power supply. So that's what I've done. I've connected a 5-volt power supply up along the top here. So I've set my clips to 5 volts. Again, pay particular attention to the setup of your power supply, and that's taking 5 volts in here to the driver board, which is what I need. I need ground, and then I connect into VCC. Sorry, I should have said that. So we connect 5 volts into VCC, and then we got to make sure our switch is over at the VCC connection. That's another thing that could catch out. So there's a little switch there that needs to be over on the VCC side, and we need to connect into VCC, and that's our 5-volt supply. So everything is grounded, we're happy enough with that. And yeah, these are just my 4 outputs that are essentially going into the driver board to allow us to control the motor, making sure we've got a 5-volt setup. So just what I was saying there, make sure we're set to VCC in the little switch. And then what we have is we've got 4 LEDs that actually illuminate as we trigger each one of these outputs. And like I said, when we jump into the code, it'll explain a little bit more. Now, doing a wee bit of a trick here. If you do not have a push button, but we want to simulate a push button, what we do is we can just connect the wire along the bottom here. I've got a 3.3 volt supply. And all I need to do is I just need to touch that wire off where I would have connected in the 2 push buttons. So you see there, as I touch it, you can see this motor just moves along a little bit. If I touch the other pin, it's moving backwards. So you can see it's easier to see it turning with this little wire around it. You can actually see there's the 4 outputs that I'm turning on over here. That's triggering our motor to operate in a particular way. And I can go forward or backwards with the motor. But as I touch it off it, as I'm just bringing this 3.3 volts directly across, I'm simulating like a push button. And it's important to note that we're doing a push button motion. every time we push the push button, it's going to move 10 degrees either direction. So you see and if I hold it down, well, we didn't actually see it there. So each time I touch it, it's just moving 10 degrees each time. But if I hold it down, it will just keep moving 10 degrees every time, 10 degrees, 10 degrees. So it just looks like it's continuously moving. So that's why we need to use a push button if we want to do 10 degrees of movement, rather than if we just had a switch, it would just keep looping around. So there's a bit in that in the setup of our stepper motor. Okay. I'm just going to minimize this. Again, I'll try not to keep the video too long. But we've sort of talked through the wiring diagram. Okay, that's just showing you it here now. So you may have, like we said, okay, there's just 4 connections that goes to the stepper motor. But do remember there is your driver board is in between there. And then you just have a power supply connection. So there's 6 wires really that gets connected. Again, if we look back here, that's what we're doing. Look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, you just can't see the driver board in the middle of this here. Okay, but that's all it is. You have the 4 output pins and then your power supply, which is essentially coming into this driver board and then going into our motor. Okay. Like I said, you may have one of these push buttons, and if you do, you'll need to crisscross the connection, so that's why it's crossed this way. So if you can use that, brilliant. If not, you may have a standard push button that maybe more people are familiar with, that just has one leg on either end. That's much easier to set up, because you don't need to know that you have to crisscross it. Or you'll just have to use taking the direct wire across and just touching off pins 21 and 22. So that's the setup. So there's a little bit there in the setup. As I said, it's important just to get an appreciation of it because we're going to be using it quite